which seems like a very long time, but it's always changing and always fascinating. I currently chair the UK Digital Connectivity Forum and chair the Jersey Competition Regulatory Authority, and I'm senior advisor at Frontier Economics. I had an opportunity to speak to Alex a week or so ago, and his background is fascinating. It's particularly fascinating because he comes as a business person to create policy for government. And I think that's a unique and wonderful thing. So Alex, may I let you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, indeed. I had a career of IT expert and then almost 15 years in being an IT entrepreneur. And when President Zelensky was elected and he stated his vision regarding future government, so it sounded like it was like actually country and smartphone. And following this vision, Ministry of Digital Transformation was created in 2019, and I joined this ministry. And since then, I work there, and my major goal and primary goal is to develop and grow IT industry, startup ecosystem, venture ecosystem. And since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, after February 24th, we kind of shifted our focus and do whatever we can to bring technologies also to our defense. At the same time, continue to do the things that we were doing before February 24th, which is bringing IT of Ukraine to the next level, trying to create the biggest IT hub in Eastern Europe, and at the same time providing more and more IT services moving to digital state. I want to keep it brief, so.
Well, I just think your experience as an entrepreneur and as an investor will be very interesting to the audience here. As a regulator, I'm deeply frustrated by government's failure to make policy, so it's very refreshing to hear your approach. And you're also, we mentioned when we spoke that your policy was for no regulation. And I think based on talking about regulation with this audience today, we had a lot of conversation about regulation, so that may be a refreshing insight as well. And then I'd like to, the government, you mentioned that all the government services were moving online, and I wonder if you can talk about the incentives and the infrastructure for investors in the country, and if you could mention what's happening in the data center market. Again, I think you have a large audience.
Yeah, I think it's worth to mention that we started from the concept which is called mobile first. So today, our mobile phones play a crucial role in our lives. So we basically live with those things, and we were thinking that there's no better way to engage people and give them the best service is to make everything available on their phone. So they don't need to go anywhere, and they basically can do everything, interact with government through their mobile phone. And with this, we came up with the idea of super app. Well, back in the days, 3 years ago, it was not a super app. It was just basic app, but with basic services. But now it's being used by 20 million of Ukrainians, which is kind of like a half population. Starting from those who just received their passport after 16 years old, finishing with those who retired. And we introduced like 100+ different services. And this also relates to entrepreneurs because you can open business in 15 minutes in Ukraine. You can open a bank account online. Well, you can pay taxes online through this app. You can, register your property, and of course you have all the digital papers, like starting from passport, foreign passport, driver license, car titles, car insurance, And you can do so many things. And right now, of course, we since February 24th, we introduced a lot of services related to the wartime. Like you can also, if your enterprise or your personal property was damaged by Russians, Russian forces with war, you can register this incident online. You don't need to go anywhere and claim the government help to restore this property, for example. I think that's from the government regulation side. And we're really refactoring many services. For instance, before DIA, we had this process of business registration where government authority was involved, so there was a human, there was an employee that was checking every application of the business. And we didn't do just a digital form, so you can file it and then someone check it. But we also refactored completely the service and remove human factor at all. So in Ukraine, there's no human being behind business registration. So it's fully automated. And to support businesses, support investors, we have created DSCT, which is, I would call it virtual economic zone to give understanding of what it is. So it's basically a space where there's no physical space actually. So it's a virtual space, and you register your company there. You have to meet certain criteria. I want to keep it simple because I don't know all the details, but you apply online. If you meet those criteria, you get to the government register, and since then, you're eligible to get tax benefits, which is 9% corporate tax. It's twice less than regular in the country. And since we target technology companies, and their biggest expenditures are labor cost. So we introduced 5 times less labor taxes. So in Ukraine, if you employ IT expert, the total amount of taxes is from his salary is in average less than 10%. Unlike other types of business or in other countries, which is close to 50%. I don't know, it might be different, but it's usually like around 50%. And above all, we also figured out that we want to speak one language with the Western world, so especially with the venture world. And we have introduced a lot of new legal provisions that didn't exist in Ukrainian legislation before. And I'm talking about things like convertible note. So you can invest before there was no convertible note, so you would enable invest through this tool. There was no liquidation preferences. There were no indemnities and other things that Silicon Valley and of course UK investors and like Western world investors I get used to. So now it works in Ukraine too. I can't keep going on, but maybe.
In terms of other benefits and incentives, it sounds like both the tax benefit as well as the changes in the law have made a big difference. I think you mentioned that Dia City was set up about 2 weeks before the war.
Yeah, well, actually, we're working on the whole setup for almost 2 years, and this was a big public launch, and it happened in the beginning of February, and actually it was quite interesting. So we immediately were cyber attacked. So I think there was a lot of Chinese and Russian IPs. So they wanted to get down the whole service, which they did before the full-scale invasion. So we kind of stopped this attack, restored all the services, and well, the next day. But anyway, it just I don't know. I think it's worth to mention too. And yeah, and we had 200 plus companies join in first 2 weeks, and then of course after full-scale invasion, it's kind of slowed down. But today we have almost 600 companies. Around 70,000 employees working for these companies, and they brought billions of taxes already.
That's fantastic. I've seen your charts, and there's a link, which I think is in the papers, to the digital ecosystem in Ukraine. I think you mentioned that you've been on a number of trade missions. Obviously, as a person between 18 and 60, you can't, as a male person between 18 and 60, you can't leave the country. But you have been able to come out to do some trade missions. And how have those gone?
Yeah, indeed. We have limitation for young, for men to get outside the country. But there could be certain exclusion, and we using the trade missions to still help companies fundraise. And I think also promoting and supporting Ukrainian startups and showcasing the national startup ecosystem at major international events is an important mission that we have to carry on. And our goal is to highlight Ukraine as a technological and innovative country and help all talents find investors, find raise, thrive. And those missions actually brought, we do not do this often. I think next one will be actually in London, London Tech Week in the beginning of June. But it's like, those few, like last year, for example, was Web Summit Liston, and after that we brought companies that we brought there raised more than $10 million. But we also visit Mobile Worldwide Congress, CS, Startup Grand Global in California, and many more.
We wish you were here with us in person, because then it could be more of a fireside chat than a digital conversation, but I think in the circumstances we completely understand why you can't be with us. I wonder if we could talk about some of the challenges, because we obviously know you're experiencing many challenges. I think one of them in particular was electricity.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
which we all experience, I think, in different parts of the world.
But in Ukraine, they were specifically targeting the energy infrastructure starting from October last year till March. So it's like a most difficult time since it's winter. Energy system, of course, is overloaded, and we had a lot of outages. But of course, the major challenge was safety. And since February 24, we have, and we still have a vibrant IT community and startup ecosystem. It was not like in some countries that they were concentrated in some place. So in Ukraine, there was a big IT community in Kharkiv, in Dnipro, and even in Mariupol. There's actually a big startup hub there, supported by government. And Kherson. Of course, the biggest community in IT community in Ukraine was in Kiev. 60% of all IT specialists live in Kiev. But still, there are a lot of IT in different cities. And of course, when the Russians started to advance from the east and from the north, they had to flee. They had to overcome a lot of challenges with get their people to safety, their families to safety. And I don't know how in other countries, but in Ukraine, in IT companies, it's called like they treat employees, definitely in smaller companies, like a family. So you build this culture. And if you treat your people like your big IT family, then you have to care about this family. So they were so focused on this, moving them outside of the country or to the western part, it's the biggest challenge. And of course, a lot of people are scared, really scared. But when Russian were kicked out from Kiev region, many people started to get back. And we saw this by the amount of business amount of taxes they started to pay, because there was drop and then started to restore. And after 6 months of the war, we even saw increase of incomes and export of IT services comparing with previous year.
Well, I think the digital connectivity you've been able to provide has been fundamental to that, I would suspect.
Yeah, and this was, and we actually were really encouraged by that and really proud of our IT sector. But then in October, when they started to hit energy infrastructure, of course you can't work, you can't fulfill contract with your customer from I don't know, from the States or from the Europe part, from the European part, if you don't have internet or you don't have power. And it was again a huge challenge. They started to buy generators. We were helping them with the free Starlinks. I know we gave out 1,000 of units for free, but just because we wanted to give them this freedom of connectivity. And they managed to keep up the operations. They appeared so resilient. So eventually, in the end of the year, we've calculated the export revenue and tax revenue in a period that is around 7% growth. So it was only industry in Ukraine that grew in the times of war.
Oh, that's fascinating, I think. And great that you're growing. I'm sure it has a lot to do with the ministry and the policy, and I think Starlink's been a fundamental help for developing connectivity. I know cybersecurity is a threat to all of us, actually, all over the world. But I imagine at a time of war, it's particularly concerning to you. How are you tackling that one?
Yeah, I mentioned it before that even the public launch of DSCT project, they trying to get out of operations our website. Well, that's and maybe just another example. On February 14, 10 days before the war, they actually launched the largest DDoS attack in our history. With this was like used. I remember this used the special exploit that they called Fox Blade, I think, and they were targeting official website authorities, primarily Minister of Defense, the armed forces, but many other things: government web portals, DIA electronic service portals, energy websites, and the backends of energy system. But they didn't succeed enough to get down like this completely, but it have taken time to restore it. Generally, in 2022, we have a special communication service that kind of in charge of cybersecurity. I think they recorded almost 2,200 in cyber attacks in these types of incidents.
And they've been able to tackle them?
Most of them, yes. So there was no like major breach in our security. I know a couple examples on local level, and of course, if there's DDoS attack for a couple of hours, you can experience services out of order. but then they restore. So, well, basically, I would say that we have overcome this issue too. And this actually would help. I remember in the first days of war, we have created an IT army. Almost 300,000 people joined from all over the world and started to offer their services. And yeah, I think that was a brilliant example of private-public partnerships so people were so, I don't know, eager to help, trained with them. So they were offering for free their services and all the products and giving their personnel to our authorities to help tackle those attacks.
Right, I think there's also a big challenge you have with talent outflow. And when we talked a few days ago, being a great advocate of gender, and when you get the finance industry, the telco industry, and the data center industry in the room, there aren't too many women, but there are quite a few here today, which is refreshing. And I just wondered, I know you've had a lot of outflow of women as well, but I just wonder how representative they are within the Ukraine. I also wondered about remote working. Are you able to bring in remote workers to help as part of this army IT?
Yeah, that's a big challenge, and it's quite upsetting for us because it's hard to see you losing the best people and the best talents. Anyway, well, I did my research in my ITU, and I would say that according to a research study titled IT Research Resilience, the impact of war on the IT industry, approximately 17 to 20% of IT professionals left Ukraine and moved abroad. UK actually one of the countries that they consider to move. Around 7,000 people serve in the army right now, and in the defense sector.
So internally and externally.
Yeah, and sometimes we see. I don't know what is the word for it, but news about their death in action. So in numbers, we estimate that from 50,000 to 57,000 people left and relocated abroad following the start of full-scale invasion. And by the way, according to the study again, 64% of them being women. So a lot of women left because, yeah, again, there's no limitation. So, about working remotely, of course, this is I think that's a common thing right now in Ukraine. During COVID times, we learned how to do it. And this experience totally being used right now. What?
And today with your presentation at this conference, you've got great things. So with that, so you're using remote workers as well?
Yeah, of course. Well, it started like if in Ukraine right now, schools, universities, they're all remote, and of course, like for the most part of Ukraine's IT companies' offices also almost empty, and they prefer. Well, generally, like if you live in Kiev, it's relatively safe, and of course in western parts even more safe. But I think in most companies there's a management decision to keep people remote because they don't want to create a risk when a large group of people will be in the same place and Russia sends their rockets. And what if this rocket hits the office? So nobody wants to take this responsibility. But they're doing fine. they didn't find.
That's great. Well, I wonder, it's a challenge. Every piece of this is a challenge for your ministry and for the government generally. What do you think the government's looking for in terms of investment in the short and long term in the sector? Because I think you've got lots of investors in the room, including the International Finance Corporation. Those investments, incentives that you mentioned are very interesting, and it'd be interesting to hear your views on that.
Generally, like, the Ukrainian IT sector is a significant recipient of foreign direct investment due to its pool of high-skilled professionals and their products. Typical Ukrainian startups usually create a product which is not for Ukrainian market but for worldwide market. We at this point, if you ask me about what we're looking, we want investors from all over the world to look Ukrainian startups. More like early stage. Of course we have different stages, and sometimes those companies are international, but still they have a lot of their employees here. So we are trying to help to establish those links. At this point, we're not building like government funds related to IT sector. We, before the full-scale invasion, we had the idea of funds of funds. I think we actually talked to IFC2 about that. We even had some money in the budget. Now this money was redistributed to help the government force. Anyway, we'll come back to this idea after we win and finish the war. But at this point, we see us as a conductor between I don't know, maybe institutional investors or private investors to companies that need funding.
So public-private partnerships that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, we can do that.
Well, I'd like to open the room to questions if there are any for Alex. I know I'm keeping you from your lunch, but it would be nice to take questions from the floor. Was that your hand up, or were you adjusting your glasses? Any questions? Yes, that's that. Could you identify yourself and your organization, please?
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is Jason. I'm a former editor for Capacity Media, which is in the space of connectivity. My question is about artificial intelligence. Ukraine has been a huge test bed for successful deployments and investment in the country. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how artificial intelligence itself is going to play a huge role in influencing and attracting investments in Ukraine as a tech hub.
I'm sorry, I heard the name Jason.
Jason's basically asked how you're going to attract people to Ukraine as an artificial intelligence tech hub. Did I get that right? Yes.
How we what?
So artificial intelligence, I understand Ukraine, or he understands Ukraine have been used for a test bed in that area. And so what are you going to be doing to expand on that?
Well, first of all, Ukraine has been home of great talents in artificial intelligence. And for example, we just before the war, Audi, car manufacturer, they purchased, acquired a Ukrainian company, Amidst, which built their AR display and collision prevent functionality based on AI. So now if you're driving any Audi, what you see on the screen is built by Ukrainians. In the same time, we have a couple of projects in AI and to implement AI in governance. But I think answering about testbed, we have a project that we start concepting it, So we want to create an environment in Ukraine where you can build, where you can bring basically any autonomous vehicle flying or what's this word I'm looking for, which is just driving, flying or driving vehicle or maritime vehicle, and test its capability to drive autonomously. So we want to become like a big laboratory for all these manufacturers who want to test out their device in a real-time environment. I think there will be a lot of things connected to defense tech in this domain, because artificial intelligence now being used in helping us with identifying Russian soldiers who committed war crimes, also those who died, and artificial intelligence being used in our defense tech to plan operations and intelligence. So there are a number of products right now in that field that being actively used by armed force of Ukraine, and I think this will be also one of the focuses related to artificial intelligence for Ukraine in next decade.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm allowed to take one more. Is there another question? Well, I'm sure you might have some specific suggestions, and everyone will have the URL for UA Tech Ecosystem, and you can have gain a lot more information through that in terms of what companies are operating in Ukraine and have ambitions in Ukraine. So with that, I'd like to hope that Alex will be in the room with us next year. That would be a great wish. And I'd also like to say, the Ukrainian people, as all of us in the room believe, have faced war with immense bravery and integrity and diligence. And your ministry, Alex, is also facing this challenge with immense bravery, integrity, and diligence. So I'd like to thank you all, and thank you for joining us today.